Hi and welcome back to my channel. This is Marlo and today I have a festive monochromatic Christmas card featuring some of the new products that were released for Christmas over at Scrappy Tales Crafts. I will have all of the products I use linked in the description box below. This is the layering Cardinal. For my card today, I am going to turn it into a blue jay. I did do a mock-up of the one on the left, but I didn't like the black line that I put underneath his face. I didn't like the way that looked, so I am going with the second Cardinal. I have the layering Christmas or the layering church with lantern. I'll be using the wreath from that set. And then this beautiful Christmas leaves was released last year. It's filled with tons of greenery. This is a chevron stencil, again from Scrappy Tales Crafts. Here's a 6x6 pattern paper that I'm going to be using. And then finally, for stamps and dies, I do have a sentiment that I'll be using from that Mary Spriggs. I have my polychromo pencils that will complement my Copic markers that I'll be using today. And then I'll be using this Brutus Monroe glitter glaze in Periwinkle. If it's still available, I got this last year. I will link it in the description box below. I looked at the Cardinal and there have been so many beautiful Cardinal cards that have been created by the design team that I thought I would take it in a different direction. I think that Blue Jays look very similar. Their body style is very similar to a Cardinal, and so I'm going with the Blue Jay on my card today. This is going to be monochromatic, as I mentioned, so we're going with the color blue. Black is going to be my complementary color. If you pull up an image of a blue jay, which is what I did to get the inspiration for my coloring, you'll notice that there is black incorporated within, especially around the face and the wings and the tail feathers. So I added a little bit of the black to the side of the face and then to the bottom tail feather that's going to layer on top. I will bring a little bit more of that neutral back in to add some more detail with that black pen. I used a B26 to add a flicking motion for the illusion of feathers, blended it out with a B24, and then I believe, I can't see the colors, they are up on the screen, but I believe I used a B4 and a B2 to add that brighter blue into especially the tail feather area. If you look up a picture of a blue jay, they tend to have kind of a checkered tail feather, and within those checkers, some of them are the darker blue and some of them have more of a peacock blue type of color. I went with that lighter blue. I thought that that highlight really complemented the blue jay. I'm not adding the checker pattern because I'm not so confident with my Copic coloring to be able to do that, but as I mentioned, I am going to flick a little bit of that black in. This blue jay comes together quite easily. There is a layer to the face, there is a layer to the beak, the tail feather, as you can see, and then there's a lot of little tiny feathers that you can add in. I wasn't quite sure where they went in particular. This one was, the tail feather was super easy for me to figure out where that one went. And then I thought that this one layered on top to really give that tail feather a little bit of a fluff. I'm going to add a little bit more black around the edges before I put it on because it was getting lost once I added that layer in. And here's where I'm adding just a few flicks to get that black into the wings, and then I think that that just adds that little depth that you see in a blue jay in nature. So these other little feathers, I'm just coloring them up. I think it's with a B24, and once I finish coloring them, I will go around the edges of them to make sure that the white space isn't showing. But once I finish with these feet and adhering them, I'm going to add those feathers where I think that they should go. Now, I've never seen a demonstration of how these feathers go on. I think that they worked out really well the way that I layered them. I think that the bird is absolutely beautiful. In fact, when I pull it off here in just a few moments, I'm going to show you that there are some cuts inside the wing that you could add additional dimension to just that area. See right there itself when you lay it on your card, and it would, you know, really fluff up those feathers. I chose to add just a piece of foam tape down the body, but certainly you could pop up just that portion of the feather. But going back to these, or the wing, I'm sorry, but going back to these little pieces, I just put them where I thought that they looked nice, and I think that the blue jay turned out beautifully. Now, the faces, there are several different ways to color the faces. Some of them have blue faces, some of them have white faces, some of them have white faces with little flecks and chests that are white with little flecks of blue. And so that was the inspiration for my blue jay. So I'm going to add the eye off camera, and I will color that eye black because they tend to have a black eye. I used my gel pen to add the white to the center of the eye, and then I'm going to use those polychromo pencils, and I'm going to add that flick of color to the chest and to the face after I add a C1, I believe, just to give a little bit of shadowing around the outside of the face. Now, on the mock-up that I did, I tried to do the flicking with the Copic markers, and I didn't like the way that that looked either. So I think just adding that light brush mark with the pen, I think that it added just the right amount of color to those areas. And once I finish with these pencils, that will complete the blue jay. And we're going to move on to our background. So I have the chevron stencil and some 80-pound Nina Solar White cardstock. I'm starting with a little stormy sky, which is kind of like a gray blue. I'm going to add it randomly throughout the stencil. Now I am going to leave quite a bit of white space when I color up this stencil. I'm going to add that periwinkle blue. I'm not making sure that every area is completely filled, so some of those little chevron pieces are not fully covered with the glitter glaze, and that was on purpose, kind of giving it more of a distressed look. But looking at the blue with the gray, I thought that that gray just wasn't fully the right tone that I wanted, so I am going to add some prized ribbon very carefully over some of the areas of the stormy sky. Now this is Distress Oxide, so the Distress Oxide will cover up and blend a little bit more with that gray. You're not going to see that gray tone quite as much, but I did leave some of that gray in. And then I'm going to pull off my stencil, take it over to the sink along with the palette knife, and clean that off right away, because that will ruin your stencil if you don't clean that off. So here's the reveal. And then I wanted to add some snow to the background, so I wanted to darken up those white space areas on this background with some more of that stormy sky. So here the gray looks so much better than it did when it was up against just the periwinkle blue. That prized ribbon really helped break everything up, and I think that it's very cohesive now, and it just blends together much more smoothly. I have some scrap cardstock that I'm going to tear, and then I'm going to bring in a double stitched rectangle. Now this is a rounded rectangle from my stash, and I'm going to cut this down, and then I'll use a larger one of the rectangles, and I'm going to cut from this pattern paper. And so I thought that plaid just went beautifully with the background that I created. Now to add some of that blue that's in the blue jay, I did add a piece of cardstock that's cut to 11 by 4 1/4, and then I scored it at the 5.5 inch mark. I needed another layer of snow, so I took the scrap piece of paper from the original scrap, I guess you would call it, and I just added a second layer because I wanted my blue jay to stand up a little bit taller. Off camera, I cut 4 pieces of the greenery from the Christmas leaves, and I cut 2 from the same blue cardstock that my card base is from, and I cut 2 from some silver glitter cardstock. For my sentiment, I'm going to add a little bit more of that black that's in my Blue Jay back into my card. So I'm going to use VersaFine Onyx Black ink to stamp Season's Greetings. And then we'll start assembling our card. I'm going to adhere the plaid paper directly to the center of this card base, making sure I have the top fold where it needs to go. I don't know about you, but there's been a few times where I've accidentally glued my card together upside down. I did cut out the wreath from white Nina Solar white cardstock 80 pound. And I'm going to add some foam tape to the back of my mixed media panel. I'll remove the release paper, and then we're going to add that to the center of our plaid. Now here I was wondering if I wanted to add a bow to the side of this, underneath it on the left, and I decided that I was going to add a bow to my swag. So I'm going to use that greenery that I cut out, and then this wreath, I added a little bit of that prized ribbon to the wreath to tie that prized ribbon back in. I'll glue the glitter cardstock to the left and the right sides, and then I'm going to layer the blue cardstock right on top. So that is going to be the greenery, is going to be my swag, but again, we went monochromatic, so I thought the silver went well with the gray, and of course I needed to use the blue, and the blue again complements the colors that I used in my Blue Jay. I'll add that wreath to the middle, and you can see it's just a little bit plain, and this is where I decided that I was going to take a piece of twine. I just doubled up the twine, tied it in a bow, and then I'm going to add it to the center of the ribbon, and I will add the wreath on top of that. But first I'm going to add some foam tape just to the body of the Blue Jay. I didn't add it to the tail feather. And I'll adhere that onto my snowbank. I'll use some glue to adhere my twine bow. And then I'll also add a little bit of glue to my wreath, and I'm going to add that right on top. And I'll use my reverse tweezers to hold that in place. I wanted to add a little bit more black so that it tied in with the Blue Jay and with my greeting. So I'm going to use these enamel dots, these really small enamel dots, to add some black ornaments to my wreath. And then of course I would like to add some snow splatters. I've kept that gouache on my glass mat to the left because I use it so much, especially during the Christmas season, and I put too much out, and rather than wasting it, I just have left it there video after video, and I use a wet brush and I go ahead and splatter that back on. I did get my brush a little bit too wet, and it wasn't giving me the snow right here, and you can see I got a big dollop of water on that left side, but I just went ahead and dried that afterwards. Here I'm adding the splatters with the tip of my brush. I was able to control it just a little bit better. And then there is my completed card. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks so much for joining me today. And until next time, I hope you have a very happy Thanksgiving.